there's a disconnection, and that's the problem. There.
I am very excited today to be speaking with Chloe Robichaud, the director of Two Women. Chloe, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
For having me.
Honestly, this is such a fun and beautiful film. It's funny, there's sad, there's so much going on. What was it that excited you to bring this story to life?
Hmm. Well, as you may know, it's an adaptation from actually a really cult film from Quebec from the 70s. And at that time, the film made a big splash. It was a huge box office but the critics were harsh and people were really talking mostly about the nudity because it was very frontal nudity at that time and it was very shocking. But I remembered seeing the film in school, in university, in film school, and being like, wow, there's such a feminist rebel take with that film, and nobody talked about that, and about it was about two housewives, reassuming their own desires in their own terms. I thought it was very strong. So when Catherine Léger, the screenwriter, approached me, I was fully on board because I really wanted to look at it from a really modern perspective. I thought that was very interesting, and I'm a fan of Catherine too. She's so good with dialogues, and she's funny, but she has so much depth too. So it was a joy working with her. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because when you adapt anything, and you say bring it with modern sensibilities, create something new. I was wondering in your mind, like, what were the key things you wanted to modernize? Because you said like there's such a feminist and strong female characters, and in many ways, watching it, I'm like, this does not feel shocking to today's sorts of storytelling, but I'm sure it would have been 50 years ago.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, so let's say in the 70s, there were two housewives. The world was mostly patriarchal in that time. And the reflection we had, Catherine and I, was like, okay, why two women now would be stuck in between their walls?
Hmm.
So we were like, well, one should be maybe on a maternity leave. And I lived through that actually. I have twins, and I had a full 6 months being at home. And at one point, you're like, okay, when am I going to see the light of day again? um, so I could relate to that. That's one thing that I think women nowadays can relate to. And she came with the character of Florence, who's she's going through a rough patch. She had a depression, and she's taking a professional leave because of that. And again, I think it's a pretty universal subject right now. And the depression is rising after the pandemic and everything. So that's one way to look at the film now, that with a more modern take on it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really fascinating piece to see these women, and these couples really as well, to see them navigate the nature of relationships in the modern era and what it means to be free. And I want to talk about freedom in a minute too in this film. What elements of a relationship cause it to feel like a prison? If that's a possible question to answer, because that's a comment that keeps coming up in this film.
You're right, and I think there's two things that comes to mind is the lack of communication. I think these two couples that we see in the film are not talking to each other. They're not saying the truth about each other. Um, Violet's husband, he's just trying to flee the situation. He's a new dad, and he clearly has trouble adapting to the situation, but he's not able to confront it, and he's just running away. And David's character, he doesn't want to, face the truth that they're not having sex anymore. He's in complete denial. He prefers the status quo, but I think the status quo in a relationship is dangerous. And
Mm.
at one point, it has a limit, and I think that you can feel that in the film, that at one point, something will explode, will explode. The truth has to come out at one point. So I would say, yeah, the lack of communication. maybe also the lack of being seen.
Mhm.
These two women, I feel that they don't feel like they're being seen. Is that how I can say it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, we even have this scene. Florence is coming out of the shower. She's fully naked and she's talking to her husband. He's not even looking at her, anymore. Uh, I think we can all relate to that kind of situation. But I was one way to kind of to explore that through just a simple scene that sometimes we kind of take for granted the other uh, our partners. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's interesting in some ways all four of these characters are trying to find some sort of life. Many of them are trying to just sort of figure out what it means to them along the way. And I would love to know your thoughts on the relationship between sexuality and freedom, because
Mhm.
this is certainly a conversation going on. There's even a moment where the bearded gentleman, I forget his character's name.
David. Yeah.
Yes, David is wrestling with, is this an open marriage? These sorts of things, and the women are they're finding life once again as the film goes on.
Yeah, because they're lacking connection. And I don't think the film is moralistic. That we're not saying this is right or this is wrong. You should be in a polygamous relationship. I don't think that's not what we're saying. But there's a disconnection, and that's the problem. They need to, through sexuality, they'll feel seen and touch again. So that's what happening is happening really. Yeah, they're having fun by flirting, and I think it gives them back some confidence that they were missing cruelly. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because there's even that conversation between the two women about what's the phrase, sexual energy,
Yeah.
as whether or not sex is needed to have sexual energy. It was fascinating conversation.
Yeah, because sexual energy maybe is not about infidelity but it's about confidence, feeling like you're in your body and feeling like you own your body. I think that's what the core of the film is about, being in yourself, really. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see them. Like you said, this is not a moralistic film, but it's a film trying of people trying to figure out what gives them life.
Yeah, and they're trying to put themselves back into priority. And I know what it is. I have twins, they're 3 years old, and I know what kind of tsunami effect it can have. It's beautiful to have children. I have absolutely no regrets. But I wasn't the priority in my life for these last 3 years. And I think sometimes that can feel scary, to realize that, oh, okay, I'm not taking care of myself. Yeah, really.
Well, I have to say that I think one of the most horrifying comments in the film is "I love you like a plant." I love you like you.
Oh, I know that's harsh, but
It's
he do
dark.
love plants though. He's always
It's true.
so for him, I think it's a compliment. But
It's so,
yeah.
yeah, but as a viewer, I'm like, oh no,
Oh no,
oh,
I
this is where we're
know.
at.
They're
But
good friends. Yeah, it's like sometimes after a long-term relationship, you have affection for one another, but is love still there? I think that's the question that they need to face and that they're not able to face throughout the film. Yeah.
well, there's a good question too. I know we're starting to run out of time, but what does it mean to know that that love is real love, or is there a definition anymore?
I don't know. I guess I'll know when I'm dead, but but it's fun as a filmmaker to just try to explore the question for sure. Yeah, but I don't have the answer. But it's fun to just release the film and people might have fun, hopefully with the film because it's a funny film, but to have all these, reflection after, and I think you can have great conversations after the film.
Absolutely, and you're right. It's very funny. There are some
Okay.
wonderful scenes of dialogue that are just hilarious. And the performances are so wonderful. That having been said, Chloe, with the film, as you said, you've given the film over. You're releasing the film. It's very exciting. Is there something you hope that audiences take away, or is it really just let's start conversations on the ride home?
Um, yeah, well, it's just maybe to feel less guilty. Sometimes we feel guilty because, well, I think we expect life to be like a straight line, but or a relationship to be just so gentle and easy. But j let's just say that it's not easy. Let's just accept that it's not easy. So if you can feel that and feel less guilty after the film, well, great. I think if that's the case, I did a good job, you know.
I love that. I love that. And as you see that in these characters, that's so much of them trying to wrestle through um,
And
what
they're
it means.
imperfect, like we all are, you know. They're just imperfect, and they're trying to embrace that imperfection and accept that they did mistakes, and like we all do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Honestly, it's a joy to speak with you. Congratulations on the film. I loved it, and I really do appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
You have a nice day.
You too. Have a great day. Bye-bye.